Weird question. What was your school experience like? What was school like? You went to yeshiva. You went to public school. What would, you know?
My first experience that I remember was going to, I guess it was kindergarten. And I got sick. I threw up. So from that first day of school, kids didn't like me very much. They remembered
Did
me
you
as
throw
the
up
kid.
on them?
No. I was the kid who threw up, and I picked my nose. So yeah, that stayed with me in school.
You were sticky.
But I do remember there was one girl who my mom became friendly with her mom, and we used to I used to go to her house for lunch a couple of times from school, because Mom used to pick me up for lunch when I was in the younger grades. And she would take me home and make, they weren't German apple pancakes, but she made a pretty good pancake. I mean, it took up the whole iron pan, and I would come home and eat that for lunch. I don't think I had it every day, but.
Yeah, you probably had it every day.
You think I did?
Knowing Mom.
Maybe I did. So that was something I ate, and I was not a good eater. I was a very picky eater, especially when I was younger.
I'm not familiar. I don't know what you're talking about. So
Oh, okay.
I've never had one of those.
Oh, really? They were good pancakes. So today's pancakes that you get are nothing like that pancake. It was a whole meal. Whatever she would throw in there, because I would eat it because I was a picky kid. So that's how she got me to eat. And I would remember that I would go through the cafeteria, and the kids would stay and they would pay for lunch, which I didn't get. I remember smelling tomato soup in the cafeteria at the time. Kids would eat tomato soup for lunch, and they had different things. And I always wanted to try school lunch, but no. I went home and ate.
Too expensive. You wouldn't spend the money on it, on a school lunch.
Right. So, but she did occasionally allow me to go to this girl's house for lunch, because she lived closer to the school. Maybe, that's why. But yeah. And what else do I remember? I remember, this is when I was older already, and I was Jewish, and a lot of kids in the school weren't Jewish, so they made fun of me for being Jewish. Like, it was not a great experience being in elementary school. But what was I saying?
Yeah, so the public school where I think you went to for elementary school, I went to for kindergarten, which is 152, which is on Nagel Avenue.
Right.
And like I said, I went there for kindergarten, and promptly got yanked out after kindergarten and got sent to private school. And then you went to 52, which was the junior high school.
But I remember I got into a fist fight in recess with one of the girls because she kept calling me names or something, and I just had it too much. So, and she was sometimes a friend and sometimes a person who didn't like me. There were a lot of kids like that when I was growing up. So,
then you went to the brand new high school.
Yeah, so we actually had a fist fight, and we had to get broken up, and there was a whole crowd around us watching us fight, and nobody broke it up until one of the teachers came.
Who was winning?
I don't know.
Right.
And then you went to a brand new high school.
Yeah,
which
I
is
was
different
the first class in the school and the first graduating class out.
That was John Adams?
No, John F. Kennedy High School.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're old, but not that old.
Right.
So, why did you get kicked out of public school?
I didn't get kicked out of public school.
Yanked out.
Yanked out. Yes.
The environment, the kids going to the school had changed, and Grandpa didn't want him to go there anymore. So.
I don't know. I think the school experience was very confusing. because like I'm sure very much the way the rest of our lives were, the home life was very different than the outside life. So to go to, whether it was kindergarten, or which was very different than growing up in our household, was very different than going to a private school where people were religious and people had different customs and different environments. So it was almost like being involved in a different world going to school, or even just going outside the apartment and playing on the street was being in a different environment than being home. Home was a very different place than anywhere else. And it never felt like, at least for me, I never even knew people whose homes were similar to our homes. So, still to this day, my best friend, he's also the son of a Holocaust survivor, but their home was not like our home. So, again, I didn't even see the similarities there. But, again, it was always like living in different worlds for me. Being home, being in school, and being outside with my friends on the block. Or it could have been like 3 different countries. So I don't know if you had feelings like that.
Can you explain that a little more? What it means, like the feeling at home versus the outside?
Sure. Okay, so with living on the block with the friends that were of all ethnicities, all religions, it was about, being the fastest, the strongest, the quickest. That was kind of the hierarchy, which I was never any of the above. And then being in school, there was a little bit of that, but not much. But it was about being the smartest, the brightest, and this, which I never was. And then coming home was, for me, a very quiet existence. For me, it was my mother being in the kitchen, my father, if he was home, he would be in the bedroom reading the newspaper.
Or laying on the couch.
And I would kind of be in the living room watching television. So, again, I didn't ever remember my father working. So he was around all the time. But it was rare that my mother and father were together in the same place. It was rare that I was together with both of them within the house. It always seemed like we were in separate places in the house. And again, different customs, different language, different everything. So again, being home was, I don't know if that explains it a little bit better.
Yeah. So I guess my follow-up question is, did you guys feel being children of Holocaust survivors? Was that a conversation that was always discussed? I mean, how did you know? That they survived the Holocaust? Was there a discussion of that, and how did that affect your upbringing?
I guess that I didn't know how it affected my upbringing until much later, until I did some research or spoke to people about it. You don't know that your upbringing is different than anybody else's until you meet people who have another upbringing. My mother would talk about her experiences sometimes. My father...
But then she didn't like to because she said she would get nightmares. Yeah.
And my father never. Like, he would speak about his time in Germany, but never about the Holocaust. So you knew it was taboo. You knew it was unpleasant. So in retrospect, the household was, again, based on what I've read and all that kind of stuff, you felt as if you turned out to be a stern. So what that means is you never get too high and you never get too low, which is fairly common of Holocaust children, because you don't want to feel too happy, because if you feel too happy, you feel guilty that you're happy and your parents had it so bad. And you never want to feel bad because bad for you was no way near what was bad for them.
Right.
So you always tried to pin yourself in the middle. And I think that speaks a lot to myself and my brother. And I think that's kind of what our household was like. Because it wasn't good to be happy and it wasn't good to be sad. So you kind of tried to be
And
middle.
laughter was verboten. If we would laugh, my dad would, "What are you laughing about? What's so," like he didn't like it if we were having a little too much fun.
Yeah, he would. Yeah, I know it's a different experience than you've had with him, or any of his grandchildren have a different view of him. For me, he didn't understand anything that wasn't practical.
Right. And the only thing he really wanted to watch on TV, although there were a few exceptions, was the news. He would
Wheel of Fortune.
There were a few exceptions. There was Ed Sullivan. There was Wheel of Fortune was later.
Later.
Yeah. He used to watch Red Skelton, and he would laugh with him sometimes. I don't even.
I never know I was before me.
Yeah. And there were a few other comedy type shows that he would watch, but very rare. Like not all the time, and mostly he was watching the news.
So for my father, everything needed to be practical or practically based, which was every time I wanted to do something that wasn't practical, a hobby, a sport, this or that, where in union my parents would shun it and not want me to do it, and certainly not support me. But there were occasions where he would pull me aside and he would support me by money or something, and then say, "Don't tell your mother." But yeah, it was very impractical to play a sport. It was very impractical to have a hobby. It was very impractical to do anything like that. It was kind of shunned. I don't know if it was for you, but it certainly was for me.
Which is strange because when he was in Germany, he was part of a choir. He was a gymnast, and he did things that were. But I think it's all because of what happened in the Holocaust that affected him in that way. That doing those things made you vulnerable to. You know what I'm saying?
So speak about the household. It was. I never wanted to have friends come over the house because it always felt uncomfortable. So there was one time where I actually had a couple of friends come over the house. And that's funny, you mentioned the choir. So I was in the choir at school. And I guess we had a practice. No big deal. So this is 4 years later. This might have been 4th grade. And now we're in 8th grade. Me and my friends are there. And my mother would... One of the reasons be uncomfortable is because she would want to hear everything that we were saying, and she wouldn't leave the area for the kids, for me and my friends just to hang out and be. It's she wouldn't, even if I'd say please leave, she would be right there. And all of a sudden, in a moment of quiet awkwardness, because nobody wanted to say anything in front of a mother hanging out, she started to yell at me, and she goes, "Where were you that day in 3rd grade?" And we're in 8th grade. And me and my friends were looking at each other and go, "What the hell's going on? That day you were supposed to come home and you didn't come home and it was late." And my friends were looking at each other, and so it was like a detective agency. So we were trying to figure out what happened. We had choir practice. we all looked back and we had choir practice. And I didn't tell my mother that I had choir practice. And she yelled at me about it 4 years after the fact. So I didn't have friends come over very often.
Amazing.